Welcome to Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest and beyond. And today, I love having guests like this on the podcast who do ghost tours, And this one is in Texas, which is awesome because I've been in Texas many times. I've been to Austin, Dallas, Houston, blah, blah, blah. I have taken a tour in Austin, but not in Galveston, where Jen, welcome. You're from Spooky Galveston Tours in Texas. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for coming, and thank you. I can't wait to hear some stories and talking to the audience about how you guys do things, because everybody does everything a little differently. I've been on, so you know, about 15 ghost tours all over the country. Right. Some do really good jobs. Some I'm a little bit like, really? Did you even do any research? So let's talk about that. How long have you been giving ghost tours here? And when did you start, and why did you start it?
Well, I've always been fascinated in the paranormal. I grew up in a haunted house, so that's always been in the realm of normal in my life. But then we've also had other circumstances that are going on where I've just always been interested in, all the supernatural stuff. I got a children's classic book of Dracula when I was little, and my grandmother would read me stories that she would make up, and they were always fancy and had ghosts in them and things. It was just always something I was interested in. But roughly about 10 years ago, I was looking for a part-time job to supplement my income with. And I had a friend who was managing a ghost tour company in Galveston. And she said, look, we did the Rocky Horror Picture Show together years ago. I know you're really into this stuff, and I would really love it if you would come and be a tour guide with me. And, I know that you're reliable, you're dependable, you can tell the stories. I'm like, great, I'd love to try and see. And I went out and I auditioned for Dash Beardsley, the ghost man of Galveston. And he was the very first person to ever do a ghost tour in Galveston, period, the end. We have the second oldest ghost tour company in Texas. And I mean, we're just like a couple of months shy of Austin, actually. And anyway, he was really great, and he had incredible stories to share, and I really got into it. And so I worked for him for a couple of years. I was doing his promotions, his marketing. I was doing all of his scheduling for celebrity appearances and things like that. And I was also tour guiding. But after every single tour that I did for him, the one thing that everybody wanted to ask me about was the 1900 storm. Not really a big deal because, a lot of our ghost stories are about that, sure, but it's known to be the worst natural disaster to ever happen in U.S. history. And that threw me down an entire rabbit hole of needing to know more about it, because I hate to be the dumbest person on a tour. And when somebody wants to ask me a question about something, I want to be able to tell them. Yeah. Well, Dash was all about, he was all about the historical ghost part of it, right? Like he wanted to tie the ghosts and the history together. And I started telling more about the historical stuff and less about the ghosts, because that's what people were asking me about. So I branched off and started doing historical tours. I was doing that for about 5 years with my business partner, who had been the lady who had been managing his company. And then she started having some health problems and couldn't do the tours anymore. Well, when that happened, I stepped out with Spooky Galveston because I have a weird, spooky little heart by nature. And I find that most history is really spooky. So I started doing Spooky Galveston, and I've been in operations as Spooky Galveston for almost 4 years. But then this is where it gets interesting. Dash Beardsley decided he was going to retire. And he reached out to me and he said, I really respect what you're doing, and I have always appreciated your honesty and your help and everything. And I'd really like it if you would step in and take over Ghost Tours of Galveston Island. He said, I know that you'll keep my legacy alive. And I was absolutely honored that he asked. And I love the ghost stories where I got to start. So I was like, this is a no-brainer. Of course I'm going to do it. So I got to go home and do ghost tours on top of all the historical tours. And now we do the ghost tours at the Naval Museum. We do the ghost tours for Carriage House Rentals, which is a golf cart company on the island. I do all of the walking tours downtown. I do ghost tours at Moody Mansion now. And I just get to to live the dream and talk about ghosts and history all the time.
Oh, I love it. I love it, Jen, because that is the ultimate dream, right? To do something you love, and especially
Yes.
something you really have a passion for, because it really shows when you're out there that people are like, wow, she's really into this. This is really cool.
Yes.
I get more out of it. Before we get into the stories and you talking about the 1900 storm, let's back up a second, because I love people. I've had numerous people who have lived in a haunted house,
Mm-hmm.
and their stories vary. Tell me about your haunted house. Did you feel threatened? Was it just kind of goofy, like, your keys would be missing or your shoes put out somewhere and you're like, come on, knock it
I mean,
off.
honestly, it's a little bit of all of it.
Oh, okay.
At the house that my parents brought me home to the hospital from, when I was a baby, my mobile would turn itself on when I would cry. So I had somebody looking out for me, right? Making sure that I would be a happy child and be quiet. But I also had imaginary friends, but I'm not sure if they were imaginary or if they were ghosts. I don't know. They all had very real names and stories, and they had very real likes, and real conversations were happening. And I mean, I don't have conversations with ghosts today very often, but it is one of those things where I know children are always more susceptible to being able to see things. And I think I was. But then, growing up, my mom was, she was very in tune with all of her abilities, and I would get grounded for stuff I hadn't even done yet. So, I mean, that's just how my life was.
Okay.
But, like, I was sitting in the living room one night. This is years after I, had been grown and married, and I was sitting in my parents' living room, and I was watching TV one night. And as I was sitting there in the dark, like all spooky people like to watch TV in the dark, the television show shifts and it becomes vibrant with commercials and color, right? And I heard my parents' bedroom door, and it jiggled like the door opened and shut. And my dad was the kind of guy who loved Halloween and spooky stuff, and he would watch scary movies with me. It's where I got a lot of that. But he also loved to do a jump scare. And I figured he was hiding in the shadow, and he was waiting for the correct moment to jump out at me and get me. But when that moment passed and he didn't come out, I was a little concerned. However, a shadow figure person then emerges out, and it turns into the apparition of a man who walks all the way through the living room in the light of the television and disappears into the kitchen wearing a long jacket. And I was like, I don't know what to do with that. I sit there like I'm not moving because I'm not chasing after that. It's not happening.
Right.
And my dad comes out a few minutes later and says, hey, did you see the guy walk through the living room? And I said, yeah. He goes, that was one of your grandpa's friends. He died. He just wanted to come by and say,
Man, see, that's so interesting, Jen, because I hear that all the time. Because people say, like, one of our stories was someone was sitting there in their bedroom and they could see their grandfather by the curtains in the bedroom. And they were younger at the time and they were kind of a little scared. And their mom came in and they said, oh, it's Grandpa. He just wants to see you're okay. Hey, Grandpa, you're scaring her. You need to stop. And she said it like, okay.
yeah.
And then, things kind of stopped, because he was just kind of looking out after her and just making sure she's okay. And then she said it never happened again.
Yeah.
But she knew he was there.
Yeah.
She had feelings. She did not see him, but she said, I knew he was there in the house.
Weird things like that happen all the time. There are mimics or doppelgangers that are there as well. My husband, when we were dating, he came to the house. He was waiting for me to get home from school. And he and my mom both saw me walk in the living room from the front door, walk through the house to one of the back bedrooms, and heard me open and shut the door and thought that I just went in there like I was mad or something. And he calls me and he's like, hey, like, are you mad at me? Like, why did you ignore me when you walked in the house? And I said, what are you talking about? I'm still in Alvin. Like, I'm not even home yet. They both saw me. So weird stuff happens.
Wow. I've heard and read a lot of those stories where people talk about like their mom is still alive, but maybe she's at the hospital or something. You know what I mean? She's not feeling well or whatever. And then they're like, mom just walked into the bedroom and, the father or whoever is like, no, honey, you're just dreaming that because
Right?
she's in the
Yeah.
hospital right now. We were going to go. So you're probably just thinking about her and stuff. You go, no, that was mom. Or people coming down the steps and they're like, hey, Bill, or whatever, and then Bill
Yeah.
disappears and then Bill walks back in. Hey guys, I'm sorry I'm late. Like,
Yeah.
what?
That kind of stuff happens. There's a lady in white. She's wearing a white gown. She looks just like my mom. She stands in front of my mom's dresser. You'll walk in my mom's room and be like, hey, mom. She turns around, looks at you, and she disappears. And then you're like, so then you have to go looking for mom, figure out where mom's at, right? And mom's usually like out in the backyard or, in one of the other rooms. Maybe she's in the kitchen cooking or something. And it's like, Mom, I saw a lady. Like she was standing in front of your dresser and she's like, sorry, I'm in here. That's just kind of normal.
I love that your parents adapted it because some parents didn't, because they didn't. And you understand that from being a parent now, and I'm a parent, is you don't want to tell your 6-year-old, oh, by the way, there's a shadow person that is walking down the halls and going through the rooms, honey. I just want to let you know that. Good night, hon. Slam.
Yeah, no.
We
were always told not to talk to the ghosts. We were told to talk about them as much as we wanted, but not to talk to them. Because if we talked to them, then more of them would come. So, because then you can contact, you make connection. And then when you do that, then more of them think they can flow through. And then before you know it, you have a really crowded house. And so they didn't ever want us to do that. But, I won't say I didn't break the rules a few times and talk to them. I did. And then, of course, there's always the exceptions to the rules where you have to talk to the ghosts, and just set the tone for whatever it is that's happening. But by and large, my parents were very accepting of unusual things. And, my dad loved a good ghost story just as much as the next person. Like I remember for one of my birthday parties, I think I might have been 6 or 7 years old. We had a slumber party and my sister took everybody into the bathroom to do Bloody Mary. And I refused to do it. I was terrified of that story. Still am. I don't like mirrors. And so like everybody went into the bathroom with her and they all run out screaming. And they're all talking about the weird stuff they saw in the mirror. And I'm like, that's why you don't do that. I was little. I was like, no, that's a big no.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my dad's setting up shop in the backyard, though, right? Because we're all going to sleep in the living room on the floor in our sleeping bags. So he put the water hose through the chimney and then starts talking and like sing-songing and stuff through the hose, which then echoes down through the chimney. Terrified everybody.
I love your dad. I love
my dad was great.
That's awesome. And please tell me, Jen, that you never, ever used the Ouija board.
Well, I mean, I did because I was dumb and I was, a teenager.
Come on.
Well, I mean, okay, but to be fair, my grandma had a Ouija board when she was younger. And she told us all about her experience and everything and about how it had worked. And it was very helpful. It was a useful tool until it wasn't. She said that the things that came through, they seemed very, very nice and it seemed very helpful and like it gave her information that she needed. And then one day she went to use the board and instead of it being kind or, being helpful, it started spelling out profane words and, it just wasn't giving her nice information anymore. So she got rid of it. So in our house, it can be good, but it also could be bad.
Yeah.
So I think I was like 12 or 13 the first time I ever used one. Somebody gave me one for my birthday. It was a birthday gift. And, it was really one of those cool ones that like was the glow in the dark, for the spooky effect. And we all piled around and we all tried it. Here's the weird thing about that, though. The Ouija board never worked when I touched it.
Really? What do you mean never worked? Like
but with me, it was never effective.
Yeah. Really? So what do you call it? Starts with
the planchette.
Planchette. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would not move.
It wouldn't move if I touched it.
Interesting. That's very rare. Yeah, I've not heard that before. Again, I have a love-hate relationship with Ouija boards because I know
the artwork is incredible and beautiful.
Yes,
it is. They are truly just works of art. But they get a bad rep. But I have to wonder: is it necessarily that they need to have a bad rep though? Because if the person that was using the board had, been trained on all of the things, occult, supernatural, whatever, and they were educated and they knew exactly what they were doing, and they walked in and they had, cleansed themselves and purified the space and did all the things that they were supposed to do before they did this thing, would they have the same effect as, some teenage girls who just get aboard?
Right.
I mean, there's definitely differences. And, I would never encourage anybody to use anything that they don't understand.
Correct. It's just like anything. When you do an investigation, you're doing tours, you're maybe having a haunted house.
Yes.
Ghosts were people once.
100%.
Okay. Now we won't get into the whole demons thing, and I get that. All right. But in general,
that's an entirely different thing.
Yeah. But in general, ghosts were people once. So if you're this mean teenage girl and treating someone with disrespect, what do you think's going to happen?
Right? I mean, exactly. Yes.
Right. Like, yeah. So it's just one of those things I find interesting. So it sounds like your house had some really interesting stories, but it doesn't sound like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, doesn't sound like you were fearing for your life, like running out in the middle of the night kind of thing.
No, we were always told to face whatever it was. We were always told never to let anything scare us. Now that doesn't mean there weren't spooky or scary things that happened. My sister was traumatized in our house. My experiences were very light and casual. My sister had terrible experiences. One night she was laying in bed and she saw a man with a knife come out of her closet and come at her, and he disappeared. One night she had a doll that was hanging on her wall, and she looked over at the doll and it appeared to be a person hanging from the thing that was on the wall, not the doll. So her experience is very different than mine.
Yeah.
Very
that's
different.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I hear that a lot too from people being in a haunted house. Some people say it traumatized me. I couldn't wait to leave, but we couldn't due to financial reasons. And that's what people don't understand is, you want to get the hell out of there, but where are you going to go?
Right.
For something, where are you going to go? And maybe bring the spirits with you. Right.
Well, and again, we're talking about, two kids, we're 5 years apart, right? And our circumstances, our situations are completely different. We're very different people. And her experiences are very different than mine. Now, did she play with Ouija boards and stuff? Absolutely, she did. Was she respectful about it? Probably not, just based off of how I know my sister. But, but she's more mindful about things now. And she's, more respectful about things now than she ever was before. When I read tarot cards, which I do, she goes with me to a lot of the events. When I'm reading tarot cards, I don't like to be influenced by a lot of outside sources. And one of the things that I find is that it's very helpful for me not to touch money on the days when I'm reading for people, because money carries energy. And I don't want to be influenced by any of the energy that comes from the money that I touch, because people have to deal with money for all kinds of reasons. And it's good, it's bad, it's, whatever. And I don't want that to interfere with what's coming through for me while I'm reading tarot cards. So she collects the money, she talks to the people, she does all the things. They sit down at my table and I read for them. I don't ask questions. I don't even want to know your name. I just want to be able to tell you whatever the cards tell me to tell you. So that's how we handle it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great attitude, because a lot of guests I've had on who do read tarot are kind of the same way. It's you want to go in that you don't want the information beforehand.
Nope, I don't want to know anything about you. Yeah, I don't want to know anything about you. Yeah, I want to know everything the cards say, and that's it.
Or you'll get a person that's not open, that they're closed off, and that does not help. From my experience.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Yeah. Don't, and this is just kind of a pet peeve of mine. Don't go to like a metaphysical fair or to a person who reads tarot cards table. Sit down and then shuffle the cards and keep yourself and all your energy so closed that we can't get anything off of the cards. Because basically what you're doing is you're saying, I don't want you to know anything about me. And therefore, I don't want these cards to know anything about me. And then the cards are going to go, well, we don't really know what they want to know about, so we can't tell you anything. And then you have handed me money and wasted your time and mine for information that I could have given you if you had been receptive to it, and you weren't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
So hear that, spooky friends. If you do that, please be open-minded and please just listen to the
yeah,
tarot
you
reader and
don't
follow her or his instructions.
you don't have to give us any information verbally. You don't have to say anything. Just think about whatever it is you want to know about while you're shuffling the cards and then hand
Yeah.
them back. That's it.
Right.
Don't sit there and be like, don't give anything away. Don't do that, because if you
Yeah,
do, the
yeah.
cards aren't going to pick anything up. I'm not going to be able to tell you anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So let's get back to the tours.
Ooh, yes.
You kind of mentioned that and everything a little bit earlier on in the conversation, but what kind of stories do you tell? And you already said they are based on historical facts for the most part, I'm guessing.
Yes. Yes.
So if you could kind of maybe a couple stories relate to my spooky friends and,
100%.
kind of what they expect on your tour.
So Galveston is home to the worst natural disaster to ever happen in U.S. history. There's been like 9 yellow fever epidemics, countless other hurricanes. We had pirates on the island. The Civil War happened on the island. There's a whole bunch of different things that have happened. And so basically, when you take a ghost tour, it's kind of like an alternative history tour of sorts. You're going to get a lot of historical information about the events that have happened in the city, but also the stories that have been passed down and or have been accounted for through all different types of medias over the years. So, like, for instance, there's a story about Jean Lafitte and how he comes to the island and he slaughters the majority of the Karankawa Indians as soon as he gets there. And then from there, he takes over. He's there for about 4 years, and then he gets run off the island because he had some of his men had double-crossed him and went out, robbed a ship. And when they came back, he found out, had those men hanged on the docks, but the U.S. Navy shows up and says, you got to get out of here. Well, it's said that he asked for 3 days to get his affairs in order. And in those 3 days, his pirates start drinking with these naval officers and these, Navy men who have come to tell him to leave. And as will happen, a drinking competition of sorts begins. And the story goes that, the pirates are pretending to get drunk while the Navy men are actually getting drunk. And then the pirates carry them back to their ships. Well, this is over the course of 3 days, this is happening. And then by the 3rd day, these men are like blackout drunk, right? They're all passing out. So these pirates carry them back to their ships. They put them back on there. And Lafitte's men, they're very kind. They put them back where they belong, but then they make quick work of loading up their own ships. And when these men wake up the next morning, hungover, probably on the wrong vessels, definitely in the wrong bunks, not knowing anything about what's actually going on because they are so drunk from hanging out with these pirates. They wake up realizing that they're smelling burning thatch and wood. And this is problematic because that means that it's very possible their ships are on fire. And they run topside to see what's happening. And they find out there that they aren't necessarily in peril. It's not going to be a fiery death or a watery grave for these men. Instead, they see the entire encampment of Campeche Island, which is what Lafitte called Galveston, is in flames. And Lafitte and his men have sailed away, never to be seen or heard from again. And in truth, and in history, we have no idea what happens to this man when he leaves Galveston. There is no record of him beyond that point. But there are theories. And that's why we talk about him. One of the theories is that he moved off to New York City and he became a businessman, died under an alias, and the headstones in New York aren't talking, which makes perfect sense when you think that Lafitte and his brother Pierre ran the blacksmith shop in New Orleans, one of the oldest bars in America. And it's still in operations today, very closely to how it ran back then. He was a very good businessman. This is definitely a possibility. He could have gone to New York, but it's not all that likely for a pirate to change course so drastically. So maybe he moves off to Cuba, becomes a privateer, dies at sea, has a burial at sea, and that's the end of Lafitte. That's a pretty good end for a pirate. It's not really necessarily all that spooky for a ghost tour, but
No.
it is definitely fitting for the end of a pirate's life. But then there's the third option, which is my absolute favorite. And that is that Jean Lafitte, even to this day, still roams between the city of New Orleans and the city of Galveston, watching over them both as a vampire. Naturally, if you can be a vampire, your spooky tour guide is always going to tell you to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I love that.
Yeah, we share stories like that on the tour.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Do you have what you consider the most haunted spot on your tour?
So there are many, and they're all
Okay.
haunted for different reasons, right? So one of my favorites is the Hutchings Sealy building. And one of my favorite stories is 1900 storm related. There's a woman who is caught up in the current of water. The water was raging about 17 feet deep down 24th Street, heading out towards the bay. And as she is caught up in the water, she realizes that she's coming up on this really tall building on the Strand. And she manages to reach out and grab the window ledge of the building, the second story windows. She manages to break out the glass and climb inside. She ties a rope around her waist, ties the other end to one of the safes in the building, because it was a banking building on the Strand. And once she does that, she finds the rope, she ties that around her waist, ties the other end to the safe, and jumps back out into the water, feeling around for any persons she might be able to save that are out in the water. All in all done, this woman saved about 50 people this way.
Wow.
Now, after the water recedes to an unsafe level for her to keep jumping out into it, she winds up running down the stairs in the front of the building and pulling people in off the street who were just exhausted from being out in the storm all night. And ultimately, injuries and illness take over and she crashes. She's fatigued and she never regains consciousness. She dies in the building about 2 weeks after the storm. No one ever thought to get her name. We have no idea who she is, but her death is reported in the Daily News.
And she haunts the building then, or?
They say that you can see her apparition on the second and third floor, and she's been heard out in Riondo's, which is a restaurant on the first floor. She's called out when managers have come in the morning. Sometimes the front doors are unlocked, and when they walk in, they'll hear a woman's voice say, "Hello, is anyone there?" But there's nobody there.
Wow.
I have had the privilege of having a store in the Hutchings Sealy building. Had the Spooky Galveston shop was in there for about 2 years. And when we were there, paranormal stuff happened all the time. Like the place where my store was at was the coldest spot in the entire building, like period. And after a day of being in there just working, I would be exhausted. It was just emotionally draining to be in the space. And, I couldn't figure out why. I mean, I would have energy, but I would just be so tired.
Yeah.
And, like you would see things. There is a man who works on the second floor in a place called Stabby Granny's. And he came up to the third floor to go into the attic space to get their inventory out because that's where they keep it. And when he walked up to go to the attic door, he came right across her apparition. She walked right through him.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's lots of sightings. There's pictures that people have caught of this woman on the staircase. Like, people have all kinds of experiences, but she's not alone in the building. There are children who have been spotted. There have just been a lot of different things that have happened in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's what makes for a good haunted building. Well, trauma and maybe some happiness too. It's not always trauma.
Well, I like to look at her story though, and and really think about it from the position of, this is how the people of Galveston really do care for one another. I mean, when she's jumping out in the water, it's pitch black outside. She can't see you. She doesn't know what color you are, how much money you have, what gender you are. She just reaches for a hand or a body part and tries to grab you and save you. And really and truly, that's how people in Galveston are towards one another in times of crisis. They don't care. They'll reach out and they'll help everybody. Could have been her mortal enemy. Wouldn't have mattered. She still saved this person.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that we should all aspire to have that kind of mentality, to reach out and help the person, whether we like them or not. And, and I'd like to say that I would be as brave and courageous as her and jump back out in the water and feel around for people and save them. But there's things in that water and it's real deep. I don't know if I'm getting back in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't know,
but I'm hoping I would. I would.
Nobody knows until they're in that situation.
100%.
Right? You can talk a big game. Yeah, I do it. And then you see the water rushing down and you're like, I don't know
about that. Did I go on for that, really? Yeah.
Exactly. What other places on the tour do you like and it kind of stands out?
I really love the Railroad Museum. We have an incredible Railroad Museum. They have an awesome exhibit in the back. And Mary Moody Northern brought the Railroad Museum to Galveston because her father had created an opportunity for the railroad in Galveston. And so that legacy lives on right through the museum itself. And it's incredible to see it. They have statues that are scattered throughout the exhibit, and they call them ghost passengers. And so there's always that, right? But people always have paranormal experiences in the actual train cars. And there's the story of a man named William Watson, who was a ship's engineer he's actually from New York. And he came down to Galveston thinking maybe he could make a fortune there. And a lot of people came to Galveston and got wealthy. So he wasn't really wrong about that. But he wore the latest fashions of the day from New York, which meant, like wool suits. And it was August 1st in Texas. It's really not the best day to wear that.
No.
Well, he winds up going into town and he has a great day. But at the end of it, he realizes that, he's overheated and it's hot and he's wearing brand new clothes and brand new shoes. And he decides he's going to go try to hop on a train moving down towards the shipyard and see if he can catch it so that, he can just ride back to the shipyard where he needs to go. Well, when he goes to the train tracks, he sees the train is moving in the right direction. But when he runs to catch it, he basically overcompensates for how far he's going to have to jump. And when he does that, he winds up getting executed in his execution. You see, he slipped, he stumbled, he fell, and he was decapitated on the tracks. Now, the next day, the newspaper says it best. Headless body smeared along the tracks from 14th to 29th Street. And people they couldn't find his head anywhere. Like, people are looking for it and they can't find it. And they're like, well, Galveston's a swamp at this time. Maybe wild animals took off with it. I mean, that's not an uncommon situation. So maybe that's what happened. But, the morbidly curious and the looky-loos, they're still wanting to find it. So they're trying to get into the railroad depot and see if it's back there in the active train yard. Well, security's running them out. 3 days go by and this head, they just haven't found it. And security is finally starting to calm down at the railroad depot because people are losing interest. They're getting on to the next story. And the security guard is making his patrols. And he sees somebody, their shadow, run by on one of the walls in his lantern light. And he runs after them to tell them to get out of the train yard. But when he gets to the end of the fence line, there's nobody there. It's a dead end. So he turns around and he's thinking, man, I'm working too hard. There's too much going on. It's just been a crazy week. And that's when he sees somebody crouched down by one of the engines of the train. And he runs over to tell that person, get out of the train yard. But when he gets over there, he realizes it's not a person at all. It's William Watson's head sitting perfectly atop the catcher of the train with his hat still intact. Now, the next day, the newspaper again says it best. It was Watson in bold print. They bury the head and body in Lakeview Cemetery, which is behind our Kroger by the seawall. And once they do that, you'd think that'd be the end of the story. But quite literally 125 years later, we're still talking about this man because his headless apparition still gets seen all the time in the train yard.
Wow. I love old newspapers because they do not mince words, right? They're like, person gets shot in the head and bleeds all over and you're like,
yes, you're like, wow,
crazy. Okay. Someone bleeds to death, someone's decapitated, and then you're like, well, yeah, I guess they were. I mean, you maybe could be a little more sensitive, but
we have a story. There's a place, it was the Armor Meatpacking Company is what it was. And we had, a lot of people don't really think about Galveston when we think about immigration, right? I mean, most people are going to think about Ellis Island, for instance, right? But Ellis Island doesn't really technically, like their port doesn't really do what it does until like around 1892. But Galveston's port opened for immigration in 1840 and ran from 1840 to 1920. There were 750,000 immigrants that came through the port of Galveston. And tack onto that an additional 10,000 Jewish immigrants for the Great Galveston Expansion by Rabbi Henry Cohen. But nonetheless, you're going to look at these numbers, right? This is a lot of people that are coming in through the country in Galveston. And at the Armor Meatpacking Company in the 19-teens, there were strikes happening for safer working conditions because the Armor Meatpacking Company wasn't the safest place to have a job.
Yeah.
Chinese migrant workers crossed the striker line, and one of them went in and actually was told to go and unbound the fans up at the top because, the cows come in, the fans are doing what they do, all the machinery
Sure.
is working, and, then you get hamburger meat. Well, he wound up unbounding the fans, which then shook back to life. And when that happened, this man fell into the meat grinder below. Yeah. Now,
That's
his
terrible.
apparition is said to haunt in that space. He's been seen in the windows and the elevator. He's been seen in the ladies' restroom on the second floor of the building. Like, he's been seen all throughout everywhere. But his widow sued the Armor Meat Packing Company for,
Her.
wrongful death, basically. And they countersued her for slander. They countersued
Of course.
yes, and
Of course they
defamation of
did.
character, and they won. She had to pay them reparations for the rest of her life. Is there any reason why this man is haunting this space? He's angry. He's angry.
I'd be angry too. Like, how did that happen? Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a shame. I mean, yeah, you hear that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Of people being killed, and they're like, well, he shouldn't have, been near the meat grinder. Be like, yeah, but you had no guardrails or nothing.
Well, that was the whole job, but okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's another story too. It's actually one of Galveston's most famous stories, and it's about a face on the UTMB building. Now, I'm not going to go into all the backstory of it and everything, but I will tell you that when the University of Texas Medical Branch put this great big beautiful building up, there was a face that appeared at the very top. And the school, they didn't really like that so much. They power washed it and got rid of it. Well, the face came back just below where it had been. This time, students that were going there got really interested in it. And so they started taking their cars and putting them behind the building and taking pictures of the face. One lady went back there and she put her car in the boat dock ramp. And when that happened, she had her headlights up, shining onto the face. Her friend got out to get the pictures of the car. Somehow her car wound up rolling back in neutral into the bay. And her automatic seatbelt locked her in place. She wasn't able to get out. So, she died, and the school got very serious. Nobody was allowed to go back there again. They power washed and got rid of the face, thinking that would take care of the problem too. And the face came back just below where it had been. Now it sits above an exit door. But this story is the reason why we don't have automatic seatbelts in our cars, because her family sued the makers of the car manufacturer. And that's why we don't have those anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I used to have one in my car, and I hated it because it always, like, you'd get in and be like, jerk, chonk, and it'd like pin you. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I don't like this.
But how wild is it that, it's attached to a ghost story in Galveston, the reason why we don't have those now?
That is wild. I love that, Jen. To see now we learned something new, spooky friends. This is why you listen to this podcast. That's awesome. I never knew that. I thought it was just because people were like, I don't like it. And no, people said that.
No, this woman lost her life, unfortunately, and her family sued the makers of the car. And they found that was, it wasn't just this one particular type of car. It was literally across the board. This was not a safe thing for us to have, especially in instances where you'd find yourself in, a body of water. And so they got rid of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure you probably had enough of these, but maybe you can share your favorite or a couple, whatever you'd like to do. Have you ever experienced a supernatural event while on tour? And how often does this happen?
Okay, so my favorite story happens when I'm very first starting out as a tour guide for Dash Beardsley. And I was really this is my first or second tour. And I mean, I love ghost stories and spooky things. And so I just love it. And so I never thought or saw myself or felt I would ever be a ghost tour guide. I never thought that was going to be my life. Okay. But I always loved it. So I'm guiding a tour. I think I had 40 or 50 people behind me. And I'm just really rethinking my life choices. Did I make a good decision being a tour guide? And as I'm crossing the street from Henley Market over to where Hubcap Grill was, as I'm making that cross, a television came on in Hubcap, and it was kind of there's your sign. The place was empty. It was closed. There wasn't anybody in the space. Everybody on my tour saw it happen. And it happened right at that moment where I was did I make a mistake? Am I is this really a good idea for me to be doing this? And the television came on, and I was okay, this is a sign I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's my favorite one.
Yeah. Anything scary though? Have you had anybody just be like, just like, whoa, 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 what's going on?
Okay, so I've had a few experiences, and I'll
Okay.
tell you about a couple other things. Remember,
Sure.
in my house when we grew up, we were told not to talk to the ghosts. We were told to talk about the ghosts. Well, at Mysticats, which is a shop on the Strand, the owners are so gracious. And when I first became a tour guide, they allowed us to come in and do spirit box sessions in their shop with them because they're paranormal investigators. They do all of this kind of stuff. And Mike, when he told me to come in, he told me to go over to the computer, press record, say my name, a quick sentence, and that way he could tell my voice from anything else that came through that night. I'll walk over, and I must have been feeling really full of myself because I press record and I say, "Hi, friends, I'm Jen." And about 12 different disembodied voices said hi back.
Wow.
I didn't say anything else for the rest of the night. I was done. Like that was enough for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that freaked me out quite a bit. But yeah, that was an experience that I had. A good friend and I were out on the beach one night. We were waiting for the very first cold front of the season to blow in. And as we were standing there, it looked like something grabbed her by her ponytail and jerked her head backwards away from me. And she's literally like telling whatever it is to let go. And there wasn't anybody else on the beach except for the two of us. When it finally subsided, I'm like, "Are you okay?" I mean, that whatever that
Right.
was literally attacking you. She's like, "No, I'm fine. Ghosts, it's okay." She's like, "Let's just hang out and, wait for the cold front." And I'm like, okay, she's a tour guide like me. Ellie is tough. Like Ellie is tough.
Yeah.
And we're just
Yeah,
like,
of
all right.
course.
So we're hanging out. We're waiting for that cold front to blow in, and the wind and the water got very, very still, which never happens when the first cold front blows in. It's roaring, and it just gets louder and louder and louder as the cold front blows in. And the waves get choppier and choppier as it's coming in, and that wasn't happening. And we both got creeped out, and we both said we were going to go back up to the seawall, and we're going to sit there, and we were going to, kick the sand off our feet and go home. We're sitting there on the bench, kicking the sand off our feet. We get lost in conversation like besties do. And Ellie looks at me and she goes, "Jen, I don't want to alarm you, but there's an exceptionally creepy man across the street. And I think on the count of 3, we need to stand up, get in our cars, and we need to leave." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, no, you're right. He's exceptionally creepy." And he was. He had sandy blonde hair, brown eyes, white tank top, khaki shorts, flip-flops, standing across the street. Looked angry, like not a good look.
Yeah.
The problem is that we were parked diagonally across from each other. So I would have had to cross in front of Ellie to get to my truck, and she had to cross behind me to get to her car. And on the count of 3, we stood up. That drew his attention, and he ran right at me.
Oh, no.
Now, I was closer to where he was at across the street because of where my truck was, so that's why he made a beeline for me. And he should have got me. By all means, he should have got me. But I managed somehow to get into my truck. I lock the door and I turn the engine over. The headlights come on, which blinds Ellie in her rear view because she was in front of me. And she can't see where the guy went. I can't see where the guy went. And I'm thinking, oh God, if I drive forward, I might hit him. If I back up, I could hit him. I don't know if he's stuck in front of my truck, behind it. I don't know where he's at. But I grew up in Houston, so I carry a crowbar specifically for these types of occasions, right? I have horses. I'm not really scared of much. And so I hop out with my crowbar ready to do business, and the guy's not anywhere to be found, and he's not running down the seawall either. He's just gone.
Wow.
He's gone. So I got back in the truck. Ellie's blowing up my phone. I answer the phone. She's like, "Let's get out of here." And I'm like, "Let's get out of here." Because this guy was nowhere and he wasn't running down the beach. So we leave and we come back to Galveston the next night. And there's about 6 of us. We all go out to IHOP and we're, having dinner, and we're talking to the security guards at the San Luis who managed the entire complex. And we had been parked and sitting across from there the night before when this happened. And we're telling the security guard about it and how weird it was. And he's like, "We've had a lot of ladies tell us the same kind of thing. But if we could find the guy, we'd trespass him." Like, okay, well, that sounds good. If we ever see him again, we'll let you know so you can trespass him.
Yeah.
Well, he walks us out to our cars because he's telling us ghost stories about the San Luis, which is really, really, really haunted. And we're all talking and everything. And all of a sudden, Ellie says, "Hey, you said you'd trespass him if you could see him." And he's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, he's right over there." And he was walking across the street from us. He was walking down the sidewalk from behind the San Luis Hotel, going back down towards the seawall. And all six of the female girls, the tour guides that were there with the security guard, we could all see him, but the male security guard could not.
What? Whoa. That's interesting. Did you guys ever find out who he was, or,
We're not sure who he actually was. There was a time where there were a bunch of addicts who wound up overdosing behind the San Luis. Within the last 15 years, this happened. There was a big epidemic of just a bad batch of drugs that some of the addicts had gotten a hold of. And and it was centrally located in that area is where they were doing their drugs. And that's where they were dying. And we think that maybe he might have been a modern day ghost, someone who did not know he was dead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we generally on the tours, we don't usually tell stories that are, within the last 50 years, unless it's a personal anecdote of some sort, because we don't want to impact somebody who might be attached to a person or a situation that has happened that, would then cause an issue for them. So we generally limit that. But that's my personal story of what happened.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. That's scary to not know where that person is and thinking, whether it's a real person or was a ghost, most likely.
Oh, definitely was not an actual person.
Yeah.
Because I tell you that, he should have had me pinned up against my truck. He ran over that fast. Yeah. And I managed to get in the truck somehow. And he wasn't anywhere. There was no trace of him. He wasn't running down the beach in either direction, and he wasn't behind the truck, in the bed of the truck, under the truck, or anything. He was nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
He seems like he was just gone.
Those stories just bring chills up my spine and everything, because you hear them from around where, people are like in a parking lot late at night or something, their security guard, or just working late, it doesn't matter. And they'll see someone and they'll be like, it's like 3:00 in the morning. What are they doing here? And then walk over to him like a security guard would, be like, hey, you need to leave. And then there's nobody there. And I'm like, oh, yikes. That's scary. So let me ask you this too. What I always like to ask is, what is the most stressful part of your job? Or isn't there? You just love your job.
Well, okay, I love my job. Okay. Everything about my job is amazing. I get to meet new people from all over everywhere. And I get to share incredible and amazing stories about Galveston with people that are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. I have the best job in the whole world.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But there's a lot of competition. And unfortunately, there are people who will market themselves as tour companies that will then hire people. Usually it's, it's internet-based companies that this happens with, where they will then send tour guides out to do whatever. And these people will buy their tickets online and they'll show up at a location waiting for a tour guide that never shows up.
That's the worst. I've had that happen. Yeah. We
see it all the time. Another problem is that we have people that think that running a tour company is easy because you should just make up a bunch of stuff and then, and label it as historic. And then you can just, tell those stories and whatever. And the problem is that then we have people who go out into the world believing things about a place that aren't true. There is a story that a lot of my competitors tell where they talk about how there's 3,000 bodies buried in Zangerfest Park or over on 23rd Street. And, they're all supposed to be victims of the 1900 storm or whatever. And it's not true. There are not 3,000 bodies buried anywhere on the island from the 1900 storm. That's not how they disposed of the bodies. And the bodies that did get buried in a mass grave, there's only one. And they weren't buried at the time when they were found in that mass grave. It was an entirely different situation. It was the Women's Health Protective Association that moved them to their final resting spot. And there is a marker that signifies that's exactly what it is. And it just really hurts my feelings when people get our history wrong or when people make stuff up. There's a national chain that likes to tell people that there were beheadings at Zangerfest Park. There were never beheadings in Galveston. And more than that, wrong continent for that, right? And
Yes.
definitely, wrong timeline, because that wasn't
Yes.
through the Galveston
Yeah.
timeline. But yeah, it's things like that. Those things make my job stressful and really, really hurt my feelings. Just because I work really hard to be historically accurate. I deep dive and go down all kinds of rabbit holes. I don't just do ghost tours. I do storm tours, architecture tours, red light district tours, women of Galveston tours, people of Galveston tours, captains of industry tours, historic cemetery tours and ghost tours in the cemetery, World War II tours for the Galveston Naval Museum, women of World War II tours for them as well. I deep dive into a lot of different things, and
I love it.
I'm working on more tours. I'm working on a flora and fauna tour, and I'm working on a church tour. I'm always busy doing something because there's always someone who's interested in the things that,
Yeah.
that ask me about them and they want to know. And I want to be able to provide that service, those opportunities. I partner with the county museum. I do all their 1900 storm talks and tours. And I love our city. I love the opportunities that I get to talk about it, and that I can show the ghosts the respect and give them the dignity that they deserve. We don't have boogie beasts that are running around, and nobody wants their great grandmother to be a ghost haunting the 10 feet and under store on the Strand. Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
And and it's generally not. Usually, especially on the Strand, you're not going to get a lot of active sentient ghosts in that way. You're going to get a lot of residual energy, because what happens is these people woke up on September 8th. They thought they were going to have a regular day. There was no warning the storm was coming for them. And by the end of it, they're all fighting for their lives in water that's 17 to 25 feet deep, depending upon where they are on the island. And they're not all going to make it, but they're going to give every single thing they have to their last breath to try to survive. And when they die, they leave a bit of that energy behind. And that's where that residual energy comes from. I mean, that's what it is. And they deserve the respect and the credit that they deserve, because they were really heroes. They were trying to do the best things that they could.
Yeah.
We see that story too. If you go on YouTube and you type in haunted Walmart Galveston, you're going to come across the most haunted Walmart in America is in Galveston. And it is said to be because of the Sisters of St. Mary's Orphanage of the Incarnate Word. And the orphanage wasn't even there. The orphanage was actually across the street on the beach side, on the other side of the seawall. But it was a girls' dormitory and a boys' dormitory, a church, 10 nuns and 93 children. And the nuns daisy chained all the children together with their clothesline, and they tied them to themselves, thinking this would save them during the storm.
Yeah, sure.
Unfortunately, it was not a good situation. 3 boys wiggled out of their ropes and climbed up into the rafters, and those 3 boys were the only ones to survive. Well, since they were Catholic, when the bodies were found, they didn't want to put them on the funeral pyres that were being burned to get rid of the bodies and the debris. And they didn't want to take them 20 miles out to sea, because that had proved ineffective. So they bury them where they find them, which would have been close in proximity to where our Walmart sits today. That's the best guess anyone has. But then you get these stories of, children haunting the toy aisle, and you have, stories of these nuns being seen and all this other kind of stuff. And that's fine. I mean, it's okay to talk about those kinds of things when those things happen. But the way that these nuns get portrayed as if they were monsters for daisy chaining these children together, when really these were immigrants who had come from places that had never had hurricanes before. And they had no idea the capability of what this storm could do, because they weren't even prepared. They weren't warned. And they were really heroes. They could have cut bait and run. They could have left those children to their own devices, but they didn't. They stayed with them until the very bitter end. And they watched after them. They tried to comfort them, and they did the best they could. They deserve to be more than just a scary ghost story at a Walmart. And so I try to paint that picture in a broader form so people understand this is the story. And yeah, there are hauntings at the Walmart, true, but there's so much more to it than just that.
I love that when there's modern hauntings, well, past hauntings at a modern place, I should say, where people go in there and they're like, wow, I think I just saw something. Oh, yeah, we have places like this around in Wisconsin where I live where, oh, hey, you go into a lot of bars and there's haunted places. I'm sure in Galveston.
Oh, yeah.
Same
thing. Many haunted bars.
Yeah. where you'll see a number of different apparitions, shadows, so on and so forth. And people work there like, yeah, it's Charlie again. Don't worry,
Yeah.
Charlie's okay. And it's just so funny. I just laugh at that because we have a bar called the Shaker Cigar Bar in downtown Madison, the capital of Wisconsin, and it's haunted, and people have seen stuff. And I've been in there. I've not seen anything, but other people have, including the ghost of Al Capone, because he would be there from time to time. Why, I don't know, but he was there, and it was just, again, it's so interesting. I just love that. It's not a modern bar per se, but it was not built in like the 1600s. Like when I talk to my UK friends, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, this bar is from the 1500s," and I'm like, "Well, no wonder it's haunted. Like,
Right.
it's been around. They did everything there. They did probably beheadings at that bar, and they probably did.
Probably.
Yeah, right. They did a number of
I
things.
had some people come in from England on, they were doing a cruise and they came in from England and they're like, "Oh, we're interested in your architecture." And I'm like, "Okay, I mean, I'm happy to show you all of the things and tell you all this stuff, but it sounds like, just based off of your accent, that the stuff that you have at home is much older than what we have here." And they both just kind of laughed at me and said, "Yeah, we want to see the more modern stuff."
That's hilarious. From the 1700s.
Yeah, you want to see these? Okay, I've got you.
Yeah, ours is 1400s. And like, oh, come on.
Yeah, right? Like, how am I supposed to compete with that?
How am I supposed to compete with that? Like, yeah, they have furniture older than our entire country. And
yes, they do.
The UK and Ireland, someone's sitting in a chair that is older than our entire country. That's always cracks me up.
I know, me too.
Yeah, they view that like that. So, before we wrap up, I have just a couple other questions for you. Would you rather give a tour to a group of skeptics or believers?
Ooh, that is a good question. Honestly, I usually get a good mix of both on my tours.
Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and just full disclosure. When I start my tour, I ask everybody on the group, I say, how many are believers in ghosts? And I'll have however many people raise their hands. And then I say, okay, how many of you are believers in history? And then we'll get a lot of people that raise their hand. I'm like, I know it seems like a question, like a very unusual question, but some people say birds aren't real. And so then everybody laughs, breaks the tension. And I tell them, look, I'm not a wizard. I cannot conjure ghosts on demand. That's not my job. But I am here to tell you the stories of the places, the things that happened, and why we believe that there are supernatural occurrences in these locations. And from there, then we get started. And everybody usually has a pretty good time. And my favorite are not necessarily the skeptics, not necessarily the believers, but the people who bring along their Dr. Google mentality and they start typing in and asking Google the questions about the things that I'm saying. Because they're like, "Oh my God, she's not lying." And I love that.
Yes.
It's validation that what I'm saying is true. I'm like, well, Google's not going to steer you wrong. Right, here you go.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever had then, to kind of piggyback off that question, have you ever had someone who was like, I don't know, I'm kind of exaggerating here, but, hey, do you believe in ghosts? And no, they're fake kind of attitude. I'm exaggerating. But then at the end of the tour, they go, "Jen, you convinced me."
Okay. So I actually have a story kind of like that. There was a lady, I was a baby tour guide. I had not been tour guiding for very long at all. And this lady did not like the ghost stories at all. Like, she was so mad. Like, her family brought her out for this tour because they were doing a whole family outing. There was like 12 or 13 of them. Like, there were a lot of them. And she was so mad, like really mad. And like every time I would tell a story, she'd roll her eyes. She'd mutter under her breath. She was rude. And then, I was like, stopping at Mysticats, I was telling the stories there, and she got up in front of the entire group. I don't even remember how many people were on the tour. There were a lot. And she goes, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself for telling people all these lies and, perpetuating these stories. They're not true, and disrespecting the dead," and just like jumped all over me. And I was a baby tour guide. I didn't know how to handle that. I was like, oh my God. Like, oh my God. I'm like, look, I'm sorry that you don't enjoy the stories. I literally get paid to tell these stories. They've been researched. I'm researching them. Like, I know these are, I said, I'm sorry that you don't like it. Please just try to focus more on the history. That's all I can tell you. I mean, or if you're free to leave, I'm not holding you here. You can go. She pouted for the rest of the tour, but she started taking pictures at the different locations and everything. At the end of the tour, I asked, does anybody have any questions for me? Even something as simple as, how do I get back to my car? Because I'm always happy to try to get that information to you if I can. And this lady, no joke, walked up, shoved her phone in my face and said, what is this? And right at that stop where she had accosted me, she had gone up and taken pictures of a stairwell. And she had gotten a picture of a woman standing on the stairs.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, you got the shy ghost. Remember I told you the story about the shy ghost and how she ran up the stairs and this lady followed her? And she's like, that's what that is? I'm like, yeah. Well, so then she sent me that picture. So I have a copy of it. I show this picture on my tours now, of course. But then, years later, there was another group of ladies that came out on my tour, psychic mediums. And one of them says, yeah, you see the lady standing there on the stairs, but did anybody notice the little girl standing next to her?
Ooh.
I had never noticed her.
Nice.
But now I can't unsee her, so she's there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Oh, I love that. I was going to ask you, I've been on tours, and the tour guide, most of them will say, take as many pictures as you want. By the way, if you do see something later on and would like to send it to me, I'll post it on our site. Is that what you do ask people to do, or not?
We ask people to send their pictures so that we can perpetuate the stories going forward, so that we can show the evidence that people have caught. And if people are gracious enough to send their pictures, I include them on my phone, and then I show them on the tours going forward. Sometimes we post them online, but mostly we just share them. We keep them for the tours.
Nice. So before we wrap up here, I got to tell you my ghost tour story that I think you'll find funny, Jen. So I was in Savannah, and I did a ghost tour there. It was a pretty good one, not as good as yours. I got to go and get to Galveston. This sounds awesome. I love history. I'm a big history nerd. Absolutely love history. I would have been one of those history teachers that would dress up like George Washington if I teach, and the parents would be like, what a weirdo. I'd be like, no, you guys are, so that's why I didn't become a history teacher, because the students would be like, Mr. Radke's like some weird dude. He's dressing up like Attila the Hun. I'm like, yeah, come on. Anyway, so I went on this tour. Then after the tour, I walked home by myself, which I found out in Savannah, it's not the smartest thing to do, because actually at that time, it had one of the highest crime rates in the United States. So people were being mugged and stuff. Anyway. So I'm walking past the cemetery. The cemetery you may have this similar to Galveston or no similar places like this, is in the center of Savannah. It's right in the center. Like you do when you go around the circle, around Savannah, it's right there. And it was used in this, a lot of people forget, the Savannah didn't have a lot of, sorry to go on the tangent, there wasn't a lot of battles in Savannah in the Civil War. However, Sherman, on his way to the march to the sea, burned Savannah and burned everything. Towns on his way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this town, the soldiers there desecrated the graveyard. They would throw the bodies out of the mausoleum and go and sleep in there. They would throw the fresh bodies out of the grave and sleep in the graves, because it was unnaturally cold at that time when they were in Savannah. So they desecrated the whole place. So, and there's been other things that happen in the cemetery it's really bad. So I'm walking past, and they would not let us in. The tour guy would not let us in, because they said there's been too many people who have been harmed, have been pushed, shoved, hair pulled, bruises, scratches. So they said we don't do it anymore, because of litigation and just, we don't want anyone suing us. We don't have the money or the time to deal with that, because it was a smaller tour, probably like yours or medium size. Walking past, I can't go in, but I get out my iPhone and I start to take pictures. Well, nothing worked. Like my iPhone shut down, and I know it was charged. I know it was. Started to take more and more. It would just freeze on me. Okay, so I get in my car. Also, I felt like someone watching me. I felt like someone was like watching me. So I kind of hurried along. And this was at night. This is because the tour ended at like 10 o'clock at night. So it was dark and everything like that. So I got in my car and I went home. And what the funny thing is, I'm staying at like a Marriott, I go to the manager and I tell her, I just went on a tour. And she's like, great, 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 great. She goes, wait a minute. Did you come home alone? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, oh, sweetie, you do not do that. She goes, here, I'm going to sage you. And I'm like, what? She goes, oh, I'm feeling something bad here. And I'm like, she's a manager of a Marriott. And she's like, come here, sweetie. And I come around and she's like, saying some stuff. And she goes, oh, I'm a psychic. I'm a medium in my, I don't do this,
In my other life, I'm a psychic.
Yeah,
yes.
my other life. Yeah. So she goes, there's something bad, whatever. I'm like, okay. I felt a little bit better after that. I get into my room, take my phone. I'm like, stupid phone. And I just start taking pictures of the room. It worked perfectly. No problem at all. No problem. So I asked the lady the next day and she goes, sweetie, she called me sweetie for whatever reason. And she said, well, they're so friendly there. They're so nice people. And she just said, well, it's because they didn't want you to. She goes, they didn't want you. So that's why you didn't get any pictures. She goes, that cemetery is very haunted. It is she said, can be very difficult. She used another word, but to get pictures and just to go into, she says, she goes, you're lucky nothing came home with you. She goes, I don't feel that, by the way. You're fine. Nothing came back with you. You're fine. So that was my thing. And it was just interesting because, again, I just was like, wow, that was just, again, so interesting to me. So so I love tours. Please go on them, my spooky friends. I do have a lot of audience in Texas. So if you are near Galveston and want to take a tour, Jen sounds awesome. I love it. You're going to get a great tour, and she does many tours. Please reach out to her. All the links will be in the episode notes. So don't be afraid. Reach out to her. But let me ask you this, Jen. What is coming up? Do you have any special things for the end of the year or the beginning of the year, or what's going on?
Well, we're already starting to work on what we're going to do for next year, for next October, because that's what we always do. We try to work on that as best as possible. We are going to be doing specialty Christmas tours throughout December. So we'll have the Holiday Hex tour and a few other different ones. We'll have one in the cemetery. We'll have one through the Easton Historic District. We'll have one downtown where all the beautiful Christmas decorations are at. So we'll have a few different holiday themed tours to take. But, we just ask that, if you should decide to take a tour, whether it be with me or in a different part of the country, anywhere, please try to support the local, small, independently owned and operating businesses like mine. I know that there are national chains and everything, and some people like that. That's fine, but you'll get so much more if you go with a local.
Absolutely. I cannot stress that enough. I always do that because it's kind of like when you go to a new place. The first thing I would always do to go out to dinner, I ask the locals, hey, what's a good seafood place? What's a good steak place? I wouldn't get on my phone. I know it's easy to get on your phone and be like, what's Yelp say, right? Give me a break.
Yeah.
I'd rather just be,
Yeah, but
I've never been turned wrong.
Yeah,
it's always been right.
Yes, and
always been right. They've never steered me wrong.
There's an entire group of professional ghost tour guides that are locally owned, independently operated, vendors just like me. And they work just as hard as I do to retain historical accuracy and give you accurate stories. And we're never going to have the advertising budget of a national chain anywhere, but we all love our communities. And when you spend your dollars with us, you are legitimately keeping dollars within the community and protecting and preserving and giving us an opportunity to give back to our community. Yes. So we definitely want for that to be a thing. So if I had one thing to say, I would say that.
Okay. Well, you had many things to say, and it was amazing. I would love to have you back on again because it was amazing. I learned so much. And, maybe near Halloween again, we can talk and talk about, some spooky tours because I love my tours back on because, again, like I said, please, really quickly, please go to, and it doesn't have to be Jen's tour. It could be another independent tour. That's okay, as long as you're supporting the local tours. But on my show, my podcast, I always have the best people who love to hear from you. So reach out to Jen if you're just like, hey, what's the tour involved? Do we walk? How long it is and everything. You should
And remember,
definitely.
I don't just do walking tours. I also partner with Carriage House Rentals. So I have golf cart ghost tours, and we do them in Model T looking golf carts.
Wow. I love it.
Yeah. They have the Auga horn and everything. Like, we do the whole thing. Okay. So we have the walking tours. We have the golf cart tours. We do a nice tour of Moody Mansion, which is a beautiful historic mansion that was built in 1895. I mean, we have a lot of incredible opportunities, and the community has really embraced what I do because I give back to the community as much as I can. And so I love it. And I love sharing our history. So you'll never have to worry about being ghosted by a tour guide through Spooky Galveston. We will always.
I love that. Love that. Okay. Well, thanks again so much for going a little overtime with me. Because like I said, I just love talking to you. You're amazing.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it was so much fun. So much fun. I love it. So again, please go check the links out and reach out to Jen, ask questions. And it sounds like it's a fun time. Great time. So again, thank you everyone for listening, and stay spooky. All right. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.